This is a part 2 of the introduction to CALR for PLA 1730. At about this point in the original lecture recording, some sound went wrong, so I just am picking up now on the same, at about the same point. Um, these are the topics that are being covered in this lecture, and the next slide will be where that last presentation started going garbled. Thank you.
As far as perspectives of the legal profession, this is a very poignant quote. First-year associates are ineffective at legal research because they generally start with an online keyword search, racking up unnecessary billings and online charges while not understanding the context of the results they have retrieved. This information comes from a study done by Thomson West. Thomson West is the publisher of Westlaw Next in a white paper that they reported in a white paper. The point here is that effective research starts with thorough knowledge of all research sources, both print and online, and a clear understanding of when and how to use each of them. This typically begins with print, primary, and secondary sources, and then you add on with primary and secondary materials with online primary and secondary materials to expand and enhance the print research results. I have an example, though, of the ineffectiveness of beginning, as this quote is really trying to explain well, is that starting with an online keyword search is not necessarily the best choice. I recall once when I had students do initial research for legal research and writing. I would give them a case scenario and tell them, go to the statute, see what you find. It was pretty much a ad lib type of thing. Go out there, find it, come back, report your results. And the case scenario was on a single family dwelling rental dispute. And so the students came back the next week, and one of the students returned to class with and cited to me this rule of law. She told me that, I don't remember what it was, but I was amazed that the rule even existed. I had never seen it myself. I had researched this particular case scenario before. It was a recycled case scenario. I was so impressed with the words that came out of her mouth, and it just seemed to, the statute that she gave me the verbiage for seemed to completely resolve the case. I mean, I thought I was going to have to shred my case scenario because it was going to be too, how are we're going to finish it up with the statutes? It's going to be over with in this much time, and it's no longer a very good case scenario any longer. So anyway, I asked the student to also give me the citation. That's the location, the identifier of where I can look at the statute that the student found. And she gave it to me, and I went to the statutes, opened them up, print version of course, right there in the classroom. And what the student gave me was a citation to the Uniform Commercial Code. Now, the context of the case scenario was a single family dwelling landlord-tenant dispute. That's it. That was the context of it. And so I would invite you to go back to your textbook for your general law course and learn what the Uniform Commercial Code covers. I don't think you're ever going to find anything in there that handles a single family dwelling landlord-tenant case situation. So this is why when you use online legal research, and as noted in the previous slide, where you need to understand the context of things, you have to orient the problem within the context. Running a search online or and even in paper, but when you're online, it's easy to forget the overall context of the rule of law that you find. And you're going to spend a lot of time spinning your wheels in online research if you let that be your normal approach. So, what does it all mean? What does this mean in terms of legal research? It's important to integrate online and print resources. CALR isn't intended to replace print or manual research. It actually, print and manual research is extremely effective. Also know that if you think in term when you're doing any kind of research, if you're in the print world, you're going from shelf to shelf in the library. You might go to a stack of books that are statutes. You might go to a stack of books that are digests. You might go to a stack of books that are reporters. These are different databases in print form. And when you're electronically searching for rules of law or primary or secondary forms of law, which is commentary about the law, you have to realize you need to recognize that database wise in the online world, you may need to go from stack to stack in the online environment. And I know from experience that using both the print and the electronic resources for your research will strengthen your research and analysis skills. All right, they will strengthen it. One approach is not better than the other approach, and to add strength to your research and analysis skills is the goal. When should you use online legal research? I took these points straight from one of the books a book on legal research and writing that I really like by Carol Bast and Margaret Hawkins, and it is on this 5th edition now. These are points that help you sit down when you're trying to make the decision of whether to use online legal research or print legal research. Know that you need to have current law. It's very critical in the law. The law is not static. The law will change all the time. And sometimes you can't find a comparable print resource. So if that's unavailable in print, you need to use online, obviously, because there may not be another location for this information or rule of law that you need. When you find that you're in a new and emerging area of law, or the law involves factual areas that involve a current event, you want to possibly use the online legal research method, because that permits you to find more current information. And when an online version is easier to use than the print version of research, of course, you want to do what's easier, because one of the objectives of research is to be efficient as well as effective. When you're researching facts, persons, or entities that can't be described that can be described very specifically, it's easy because you have discrete. If you can have a discrete search that's fairly predictable, then you would want to use online legal research. And when you have a narrow time limit to retrieve the information, of course, online legal research may, from time to time, be a faster way to go about it, especially when you're dealing with the idea of with like the point on bullet point number 3, where you are going into a new and emerging area of law. You're going to save time. And the final thing, the final point on this slide, is site checking. Site checking is where you check to make sure that the law that you're wanting to apply to your legal problem, to your factual circumstances, is current. And site checking, there is no faster way than to do it online. So once you learn how to site check a case or a statute or an administrative decision to learn about whether it is a current or if there are any changes to it, then online legal research is fast and effective and extremely easy. It's just the best way to go for site checking. And you'll learn more about that in the courses. All of these points you're going to be more familiarized with as we move along through this course and through your legal research and writing course. When should you use the manual research? Well, here are some points from the same book I just noted. When you research older materials or historical data that haven't been uploaded to the internet somewhere or in an online database or a paid database, obviously you need to do this manually, and this is not uncommon when it's really older materials you need. The author Carol Bast and Margaret Hawkins also recommend, when you're dealing with procedural or evidentiary question of law, I think that makes sense because of the contextual nature of procedures and evidence, and that procedural law tends to use terms that are used in everyday use. For example, the term complaint is a procedural word. A complaint initiates a lawsuit, and procedurally, if you were to look for a do a search that uses the word complaint, you would have a really hard time not coming up with a lot of results. If you know nothing, the third point, if you know nothing about the area of law or the subject you're researching, manual legal research is very effective. Studies show that attorneys do find that secondary sources such as treatises and legal encyclopedias are much more friendly in the manual legal research environment because of the way they're designed and how they provide the information. A print source is also sometimes preferable to an online version. In what they're trying to say here, I believe, without their own expansion, but some things are just easier to use the print source with because they have the table of contents in them. This was mentioned in an earlier slide. They're just easier. So the information is easy. It's easier to do the research in a print source. I find that the statutes of Florida, for example, is perfectly it is so much easier in the print source than it is online. The next point, information that's not available from a reliable online source. All right, so this looks to information literacy. You must use reliable sources. It's very easy online to find too much and a lot that is not even reliable anymore. The next point is if you find too much or irrelevant information using online research sources. Next, establishing a general knowledge of an area of law. They are referring to secondary sources, which is described in the next lecture. And the secondary sources, like encyclopedias, which I mentioned earlier, are much more friendly in the paper environment. When you're exploring complex concepts and legal theories, if it's complex and you run a search, you end up with very distilled information, and you don't see the entire concept as a whole. For example, a case is found by the machine and it says thus and so, but it is hard to read above and below. You can do that, but you have to remember that the little small pieces of information that come at you in an initial search are not as valuable as the whole picture. So again, this kind of goes into context and the relationship of areas of law in practice, business, or the practice of family law, etc. It can be too complex to look at the idea or the rule of law from just one snippet without expanding outwardly a larger picture. Finally, when the search terms are too common or ambiguous, have alternate meanings, remember the example I gave you in the earlier bullet point where I mentioned the word complaint. That means too much. It can be found in too many different scopes. Just, the customer complained, or the customer filed a complaint, for example, and meaning that maybe within a store or within a business, a customer was upset and made a complaint, versus a complaint was filed with the Middle District of Florida Tampa division, and that's a procedural, legal procedural issue. Or if you have too many synonyms, and part of your initial research that you're going to be finding out more about is going to be that you're going to have look for synonyms when you're trying to narrow your online search. So the post-filtering, the post-search filtering that you're going to learn about more in Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, and Chapter 3 and 4 mostly, is going to give you an opportunity. If these terms are too common, or you have too many alternate meanings or synonyms, get to the books. Go to the books. You will be able to distill that by your findings by looking at things like the table of contents. So a quick ethics checkpoint. All right. Due to computer dependence, law graduates often lack research skills. This is real world data from a survey done by the American Bar Association. The computer is ill-suited for finding concepts. Concepts is what it's saying. It's great for finding discrete words of specific cases, but that in and of itself is just data collection. The computer simply looks for certain combinations of zeros and ones. That's what the computer does. The law, however, is not a series of calculating machines where definitions and answers come tumbling out when the right levers are pushed and the right buttons are pushed as well. Because the law is very concept oriented, and concepts are best founded in sources that are categorized, Categorizing, so far, is a human task. Computers do not categorize. That is, artificial intelligence is not set to categorize. It can organize by subject, etc., but categorizing is not a computer ability. It just isn't. Things like digests, which are a method of finding case law, and they're available on LexisNexis and Westlaw Next, but using them correctly is another story, and it's best learned on paper. And because of this concept-oriented approach, realize that the law books are set up to resemble law school in terms of how law school is organized. Property is an example. A larger topic of property is covered in things like digest finding tools. So the other thing, what else? Computers cannot think in analogies. In its search for the zeros and the ones that you ask for it to search for, the computer won't uncover the link between analogous concepts, meaning that I'm researching a set of facts that happened in, Florida somewhere, and I'm looking for a case that's analogous so that I can tell the court that it is required to follow that. It's mandatory, that it's controlling, that the court has to follow it. And the computer can't do that. It takes a thinking legal professional to do that type of thought. All right. So the primary takeaway in conclusion for this lecture is to help you, the student, recognize that there are great strengths in both print and electronic research. Differentiating between the strengths and benefits, like driving a car, is learned behavior. You will get the keys to the city, and what I mean by that is the Westlaw Next passwords are coming. But pay attention to the print researching skills you'll learn in this class. I hope, if nothing else, to help you with this course to get familiar with how to use electronic research sources, because I know, and I know because studies tell me, you will likely head to the electronic sources first. I just know that. The over-reliance, however, on electronic resources can be dangerous and seriously impact your learning of analytical reasoning, categorizing, analogizing, conceptualizing, etc., etc. I hope you take this advice seriously. If you want to learn more about the research I've relied on in this lecture, the next slide includes some peer-reviewed research sources. All right, so that's it. It is. Here are the peer-reviewed research sources that you can certainly take a look at. I recommend that you do that, looking at research to see what is working and what is not, or what the best practices are is going to benefit you. All right, that's it. Thank you so much.